bread and butter mix.
Yeah, it is.
Did you know that you can ride a bike directly from the coastline in New Haven straight to the Massachusetts line on a trail that used to be a canal? The Farmington Canal Heritage Trail cuts straight through the middle of Connecticut. Our guests today on the Municipal Voice are Barbara Collins, president of the Farmington Valley Trails Council, who advocates for the trail in the northern part of the state, and Lisa Fernandez, the president of the Farmington Canal Rail to Trail Association, who supports and advocates for the trail in the southern part of the state. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great to have you. So for our listeners, I think the best place to start is at the top. Can you give us a little bit of the history of the Rails to Trails movement and why the Farmington Canal was the perfect fit to become a trail?
Why don't I start?
Yeah.
Since we began this whole thing down here in Hamden, actually.
Okay, right in Hamden.
Yeah, so this is the Farmington Canal Rail Trail Association. The Interstate Commerce Commission was beginning to permit abandonment of the railroad right in Hamden, where the big Stop and Shop is. And this was a problem. There was a collection of local residents who were very much against the proposed mall that was going to be built there. And during that process of protesting the mall development, they discovered that there was this right-of-way for the old rail line that had been abandoned prior.
Okay.
And so upon that discovery, they followed their dream, which is they petitioned the state to preserve that right-of-way in the public domain throughout Connecticut. It had that entire rail line had largely been abandoned by that point. And so they were successful in doing so. And the dream was, of course, to build a recreational trail. And this was just one small example of what was happening nationwide in terms of the abandonment of railroads as a means of commercial transport throughout the country, with the growth of highways that really began under the Eisenhower administration in the 50s. And this was a completed process in Connecticut and New England overall. 91 and 95 were obviously already very central conveyors of commercial goods at that point. And so the railroad no longer made that much sense.
So historically, the railroads had rights to these right-of-ways all the way through. And then they were no longer using them. And so prior to the start of this movement, it would have just been reverted to the landowner. What would have happened with that land?
Well, the state would have had the right, they were in a position to sell those lots of those rights of ways off to the highest bidder.
To the state, and the state would have been selling them
exactly,
on.
Exactly. Because the railroad right of way was in the public domain. You know, it was a function of the state
the
to
right of way
protect
from the state was who they had the rights from.
Exactly. So the petitioners, who were the founders of the Farmington Canal Rail Trail Association, were petitioning the state. They just didn't want the state to then sell off the trail piecemeal, or the potential trail piecemeal, to the highest bidder.
Yeah, you already had this kind of corridor built. The infrastructure was almost there already.
Right.
I mean, I guess that's one of the appeals of the rail trail, is that a lot of the hard work, leveling things, cutting through mountains, making a lot of stuff is already done.
It was already done. And what was really great in the case of the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail is that was preserved in the public domain. Because if you look at other trail systems in Connecticut, the biggest challenge they have is putting the right-of-way back together, essentially, that formerly existed. Because it
existed before, but the state did,
the trolley
in fact, sell
line,
off
for example,
those sections.
Yeah.
Right. As the trains went away, I mean, this actually predates, because it was actually supposed to be a canal trail. That's why it's the Heritage Canal Trail, because the canal was supposed to go from New Haven all the way to Northampton.
Yeah, and this is in the 1800s we're talking, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then it became train, and then as the train stopped using it, they you'll see, if you were to follow the trail, that there's some places where there is no real trail. You can see the train tracks are gone.
Okay.
And even the area where the train is, but there's other places where it's clear this is where the train used to be.
The signs of locomotion.
Right.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So what are the differences between your respective organizations? Because you both work on the same trail, right? But you're not the same organization. Is that correct?
Correct. They're Southern.
Mm-hmm.
They go from Plainville south.
Mm-hmm.
And we started about 30 years ago. Preston Reed took their vision
Mm-hmm.
and said he personally started and agitated and started the Farmington Valley Trails Council
Mm-hmm.
to get the trail to go up north to the Massachusetts border. We weren't thinking beyond Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
We were just trying to get it to the border. But he pushed it and got it done. And first was 6 miles, I think 1996. And then we worked together, and we now have it from all the way from Plainville, the town line, Farmington, all the way up to the Mass border. And then we have a side trail that goes into Collinsville.
Okay.
Very popular. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people use that trail every year.
Mm-hmm. So your organization came in first, and then when did the southern half kind of
Oh,
get
no,
going?
we were,
they
as
were
I
first.
explained, we were first because
Oh,
this
you
was
were
this
first.
group
Okay.
of petitioners from in 1987 who noticed that that the state was about to sell off the right-of-way behind where this mall was going to be built, which was never built, by the way. So the citizens were successful on that score as well. But Nancy Alderman was our founder back in 1987, 1988.
Was that over by where Stop and Shop is?
Exactly.
That big parcel across the street that had that other?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right, where the trail runs behind that now. Now there's the tunnel below Skiff Street. That's exactly
where they were going to
all
put
of
them all
this
in, huh?
started. Yes.
Wow. All right. Well, good work, everybody.
All those years ago.
Yeah.
Now, we did have one problem that they didn't have,
what was
because
that?
as you said, the trail was all nicely laid out, except we also had this little thing called up in East Granby, which needed a bridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing when you have a little bridge, but we needed a big bridge to get over the area. And so we got, we had parts we could get done pretty well, and then there were parts that just had to wait.
Now, you say you needed a bridge to get over it. Had there previously been a railroad bridge there, and it had gone away,
Yes.
had been destroyed or knocked down or whatever?
It was still there, but you couldn't use it.
But it wasn't safe.
Correct.
You needed to upgrade certain parts of it. Yeah.
Correct.
So these are non-governmental agencies. How much do you work? How much do you cooperate with municipalities along the trail? Like, what does that look like?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I should say that we're both entirely volunteer run. There's no paid staff of any kind. We rely on membership donations and the occasional grant for big capital projects. And we also do collaborate tremendously. We couldn't do anything that we're doing without the cooperation of the municipalities through which the trail runs, for sure. That's absolutely central.
The trails are owned, I'm going to say owned, by the municipalities.
So as it passes through each town, that
Correct.
town owns or maintains and oversees and is responsible for that section.
Correct. We try to help them out by, one, reporting problems, and two, working with them for maintenance and improvements in the trail.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Farmington Valley Trails Council has put up repair stations. We've also worked with groups like
Bicycle
the Rotary
repair
Club.
station.
Yeah, bicycle repair stations. We've worked with the Rotary Club to put up, water fountains, and we've done some kiosks so that people can get information about the trail. But it's always with permission of the town, and we offer to the town. Trail maintenance is expensive.
Yeah.
They've got to cut routes. They've got to asphalt over. So when a town needs some assistance, if we can raise some money to help them, we actually will raise the money. So going back to that bridge, the town that it's in is a tiny little town, which wouldn't be able to afford. I think it was almost $800,000, and this bridge is old.
A big price tag for a small town, but it benefits everyone along that trail.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the federal government was going to pay 80%, but even the 20% left over was pretty sizable. So we raised half of it for the town to get it over, so it got done.
So you, as organizing bodies, you sort of coordinate the efforts of the towns, and you can help with the fundraising. Because
we have a bit of a regional voice, because we each represent multiple sections of the trail, which obviously run through more than one town, we can play that role fairly effectively, right? That we're advocating for a community of people, bikers and walkers, strollers, dog owners that are walking along the trail. and they're passing through towns. You know, they're not necessarily aware that they're passing from one town to another, but the point is they're on a trail that has its own branding, you know, that's very coherent.
Yeah, and to do that, we talk a lot at CCM about promoting regionalization, and this trail is a great example of that. You know, all the way up and down the state, you've got all these towns working together. What is it like to coordinate that, not only with the towns but also with the state? And it sounds like you work with some federal grants too.
We work with yes, and so what happens is we try to stay on as many committees as we can, and the East Coast Greenway also is involved because there is the East Coast Greenway Trail, which overlaps to a certain extent, but also goes independent to a certain extent. So
there's some sections that are both and kind of okay.
Correct. You'll see the marking. So that, but yeah, so we're on some DOT committees and we work with Bike Walk Connecticut to also be involved in getting the information. Bruce is very involved in getting us information. He's for the East Coast Greenway, and he's invaluable about the contacts he's made. Yeah, so that we always kind of know what's going on.
So is there a certain amount of overlap between these different organizations? Like you kind of see the same sort of people that are interested?
There's definitely a strong overlap in terms of the interests of the folks that are advocating at the East Coast Greenway Alliance. Bruce Donald is the tri-state coordinator for the East Coast Greenway Alliance and is involved in officially designating existing or trail systems that are being built as part of the East Coast Greenway, which goes all the way from Key West to Calais, Maine. It's more than 2,000 miles. And we're part of that. We're very proud to be part of that. So there's definitely a lot of overlapping and synergistic interests for sure.
That's really cool. So are there people that do the entire thing? Is it kind of becoming the bike equivalent of hiking the entire Appalachian Trail, like one of those life goal bucket list sort of challenge things?
That is exactly the sort of the way the East Coast Greenway likes to describe themselves, is that they're a trail connecting cities. And that, you know, they're kind of like the Appalachian Trail, but instead of connecting mountain ranges, they're connecting cities.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah, a different way to look at it. So that brings up a good question. So who uses the trail? What are they using it for? You know, are a lot of people biking all the way through Massachusetts? Is it more people on their daily commute jogging? Who's using the trail?
We get the joggers, we get the dog walkers, and we get a lot of people who want to do a 10-mile, 20-mile. But we actually have people who, as their vacation, come to here and will start in New Haven or somewhere up and go all the way to Massachusetts. Yeah. And that's their vacation, and they're passing through.
I imagine you get a lot of like the leaf peeper kind of crowd would want to do that ride. That'd be a great one. That's really cool.
I will say also that especially down in this more densely urbanized area in the southern part of the state, in New Haven and into Hamden and North Haven and so forth in Cheshire, you do get a lot of utilitarian users of the trail who are really
people commuting
going
back and forth to work.
We get that a lot. Yeah
If you want to get through a crowded urban, having this dedicated trail, you know, especially if I don't know if all the towns along the trail are as active as New Haven, but if they don't have separate bike lanes and that sort of thing, this could be a real nice way for people to kind of use their bicycles to get through. We're moving that way
because we're getting the trail. Some of the expansion that we're doing now is to get people to be able to go from East Granby into Hartford. Okay. So that's why
like a side trail.
There's going to be a trail that goes through Bloomfield. They're very excited about how that trail, and there's a trail that's going to go through Terriffill, which is part of Simsbury, and then into Hartford. You'll see Windsor is actually also working on their trail. So we are not as much. We were really kind of the straight trail through to Massachusetts, but now we're expanding and making it easier for people to commute on trail.
Making that connection between the recreational through biker, whatever you want to call them, and the daily using their local 5-10 mile strip to make their life easier.
Correct.
And an example of that is that now there's a vision certainly and beginning planning, for example, to make a connection from the New Hallville section of the trail in New Haven to the Southern campus, which would be great for people commuting to Southern. It obviously, the trail connects directly now into Yale campus, so that's really makes it super easy for people that are commuting into Yale. but there's a lot of other universities and colleges in New Haven that we'd like to connect to as well. And that's what's great about being at this more mature phase in terms of trail development, that we've largely, we've been very energetic for decades in terms of getting the funds together to design and build this trail. Now it is largely built. We're not finished. I'm not going to say we're completely done with that yet, but it is largely built. And so what that means is there's just growing awareness of its utility for commuters as well as for people that are coming through using it for recreation and tourism and so forth. And so that's really the phase that we're at now, is really making these connections from the trail to other places where people work.
That's sort of interesting because in some ways it's bringing the trail back to a certain extent to some of its commercial, that transportation use, not just recreation. It's a continuation of some of that tradition there. You said something about Southern. It seems that universities would be a natural sort of partner in this. Have you worked with any of these universities saying, hey, do you want to get this trail to come to campus? Is that something they've expressed interest in?
Absolutely. Yes. And there are people at Southern that are quite interested in that. And it's not far away or anything. So there's no reason why we couldn't make that happen. It's just not as easy as it was with Yale. And I'm not going to say it was easy historically with Yale either. Originally, Yale was against it. They were going to take over and build a building right on top of the right-of-way of the trail. And so we had to do a lot of work back then. This was prior to my time with the organization, to essentially lobby Yale to persuade them that this was actually an asset for the university. And now
how long ago was this?
This was, I'm going to say, about 20 years ago.
Okay. So just when this whole movement was getting started.
Right, or a little bit after that, but about 20 years ago.
So this was very kind of early. Like they were...
Early-ish.
Yeah. But having them go first, do you think that helps? It makes it easier when you're talking to Southern and be like...
Absolutely, because you
have all these examples of how it's benefited
of how successful it is and how well it's used, and that it's really popular. And students just use it as a commuting corridor. That Yale's 2 new residential colleges are completely adjacent to the trail. Yeah. And they actually have
right through. It's a little bit...
They have gargoyles that celebrate the trail, too, that are on the trail side. So.
Did the railroad ever actually go through that section of Haven, or was it just the canal part?
The canal definitely went through there. I cannot tell you for sure whether
there's a certain section of it that I see in downtown New Haven that do appear to be kind of cut down in, like they are almost like canals. And there's a tunnel somewhere on Yale campus
below
too, right?
Temple Street.
Which they
that's not technically part of campus, but that's the new phase 4.
Okay.
That we're now very close to being able to bid
so it's
out.
not part of the campus; it's still on that right of way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just beyond where the trail ends.
Okay, but Yale worked on that in conjunction?
Well, they had to, of course, give permission for the trail to be built in that section. And they do wonderful work helping to maintain it. They have really nice plantings along the trail. And a lot of students, especially with those new residential colleges, are using the trail.
That's really cool.
Now, up north, what we have is Central Connecticut. What they're going to do in Plainville, which is the one part that is not done. But one of the things that they've already put as part of the design is to expand the trail over to the fast track. So that, which will then get the students into the college if they want to.
That's the
commuter buses.
Line. Yeah.
So that was something that they already put through. And then, as I said, that trail that's going to go Bloomfield and Terrafilin area is going to be very close to the University of Hartford. So we're not going to them saying, hey, we want to do this. We're actually just doing the trail anyways. But that bus, the trail to the bus thing was strictly the state thinking, that's what we need to do to get kids so that they can commute on.
Since we have a new governor, has your organization worked at all with the new administration? Has that changed any dynamics for you guys?
Yes, they're working. The budget's a problem, and we're still working.
Yeah, I mean, the budget's a problem for a lot of people, certainly.
Right. A lot of the funds for trail building actually come out of an earmark that comes from, not an earmark, I'm sorry, but required funds out of the highway funds that come into the state from the federal government. And so they're called alternative transportation funds. There's historically, that money is largely passed through. It passes through the Connecticut Department of Transportation and down to the municipalities that are constructing the trail. Okay. And then we've had some success with our delegation down in Washington to provide extra funds and earmarks to, for example, provide the funding to build phase 4 in New Haven, which will take the trail finally down to the water where historically it began.
Awesome.
2 centuries ago.
2 centuries, yeah, long way to get there. Pause for a second, do a station ID. You are listening to Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We're also streaming live on Facebook Live and YouTube. Just go to facebook.com/New Haven Independent or go to ccm-ct.org. Thank you. So you mentioned the commuters and trying to get these side trails, which are going to bring riders more in contact with city streets and stuff, right?
Correct.
How do you address safety concerns? How do you mitigate the risks with the trail crossing streets and kind of being more integrated and not separate, like the right-of-way?
Signage, communication, and education.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to put lights on some of the intersections, some of the busier intersections, to see if we can get the cars to stop. Because the problem, we do have problems with cyclists, particularly, zooming across and not looking where they're going. But the real issue is the cars.
Yeah. Not
stopping, even when they see it's a crosswalk or even when they see that's a yellow light.
Yeah.
Which is warning them that are people. But people are getting better and better. It's like every day it improves. But there's still always that person where the car in front is stopped and they decide they have to go around them.
And the car in front stopped because they saw a bike coming.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, but it really, even in 5-10 years, it is just so dramatically improved. It's unbelievable.
Just people's understanding and attitude towards it?
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you have it in the neighborhood and you get used to seeing it, it just becomes part of your flow. You pause and you stop before you go across.
Correct.
So it's the new sections that really require rewiring how people think about their
we
traffic
have some
patterns in their town.
At least the northern section, we cross 189, we cross 20. Those are very busy streets.
Yeah.
And so that's taking more education because people who are driving it aren't local. I mean, a lot of them are, but not everybody is. So they just want to keep going.
Yeah.
They don't want to stop.
So
I will just, I just want to encourage anybody listening who is a biker or a walker, though, to please stop whenever you reach a street intersection and you're on the trail. That's so important for safety. I mean, there is a history of accidents and bikers and walkers
for their own
being
safety.
hurt.
Yeah,
exactly. Even though it is, they do have the right of way, they still need to stop for cars because, as Barbara pointed out, it's just really not everybody knows if you're in a car. I mean, even those of us who
the cars are supposed to stop, but if they don't, the biker's the one that's going to suffer the most.
Yes,
correct.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they always need to look out for their own safety first. But
staying on safety, we do a lot of education for people on helmets, riding. Now, it's interesting.
Tell me about your education efforts.
Well, it's always trying to expand. I mean, right now, actually, helmets is something we always try to encourage people to do, and we actually give them a discounted coupon. We actually man tables. This is the northern section. Try to do at least once or twice a month where board members and then volunteers will sit at a table at a section of the trail just to hand out information, just to ask questions and whatever. And we give out coupons for helmets to try to get people to wear helmets.
Oh, that's cool.
You'd be amazed at the number of times we see it where we've got the child is wearing a helmet and the parents are not. And and it's like, so if you have a bad fall,
what's your
how's that child going to get home?
Exactly.
They're just not making it. But the other issue that we're having now is the issue of speed, and then speed with e-bikes, because
e-bikes,
electric bikes.
Oh, is this a growing thing on the trail?
Electric bikes is the fastest growing market now for bikes.
Okay.
It's something like 60% of all new bikes that are sold are e-bikes.
Are e-bikes? Okay.
And there are 3 types. And you might not even notice that you have an e-bike because they're getting the design is getting to look just so much more like a street bike, but they can go faster.
Okay.
And so we're trying to start a campaign on speed. Now going back to the municipalities, since the trail sections are owned by the municipalities, we're working to try to get all the municipalities to agree to put up speed limit signs on the trail. Can't guarantee it. There will really be no enforcement, but to try to get people to think about how fast they're going when they're on the trail.
That's interesting. So the trail is meant for bicycles, walking, whatever, and obviously not motorcycles. These e-bikes, they don't cross the line into being a moped or something?
They're close. The going to call them level 3, but there's one kind that is very much like a moped, and most stores in Connecticut, at least up north, don't even sell them. So it's the 1 and 2, and those really, there's an ADA issue because there are some people who couldn't use the trail if they didn't have access to an e-bike.
Okay.
Because it gives with hill assist, and it just helps them and makes it much easier for them. So we need to accommodate, and it can work, but we just have to educate both parties. I mean, there are people who are on street bikes who can go clearly faster than
just as
12,
fast,
15, 30.
Oh, and they are. And this is the problem
on the downhills.
too. As this is the old cliche, right? I mean, the increase in popularity just increases chances for conflict.
Yeah.
A further measure for safety is bike bells. And what our group has done is to provide free bike bells the same way that FVTC is providing discounted access to helmets for all trail users. We have always provided bike bells at any kind of event function that we're present at. And we ask for a small donation if they can't put it on their bike right away. But if they're actually biking there, we always offer to put it on their bike for them.
That's really cool.
Right.
And that's been very effective, and people do really appreciate it because it's just not something that you think about a lot, is making noise when you're on your bike, and that's really important.
If riders wanted to visit you and get a coupon for a helmet or visit you and get a bell, is there like a schedule when you're in there? Should they check out your websites? I assume you have websites?
Check out the website and send us an email at info@farmingtoncanalgreenway.org.
FarmingtonCanalGreenway.org. And
yes,
correct. The same. We share.
You share a domain.
We used to be separate. Now we're sort of we've come and made a partnership. So
as the trail
as
the trail becomes
together,
one, we're increasingly becoming one as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we also give out bells when we're on the trail or when we go to events. And then we try to talk to people about, if you don't like to use a bell, then learn to yell out. It is amazing how many people will pass people and not bother with
just give on your left,
on your right. It's just simple.
Basic. Yeah.
I just want to say that we do have a map, and that is available whenever we're at events for sure, and it's also in a lot of kiosks. We keep them supplied at the kiosks along the trail, and it contains some guidelines for safety in it, which is valuable to read. I encourage people to read those guidelines.
Correct.
That's great. So you mentioned you two organizations are slowly kind of coming together, and that's, as you mentioned, because the trail is coming together.
Correct.
As of right now, there's one major gap left in Connecticut, in the Southington-Plainville area. Is that correct?
That's the gap, but then there's also, it's hard to call it a gap because it's truly the beginning of the trail from Long Wharf on the Long Island Sound in New Haven onto Yale campus, which is a 1.7 mile section. That we're delighted to be able to say that it's finally going to be able to go out to bid, we believe, relatively soon. Yeah.
And then up in Southington-Plainville, what was the challenges up there?
Well, first there was the not in my neighborhood, because even though there's been some great success in Simsbury, even Simsbury had huge battles over putting the trail because their neighborhoods were like, no, we don't have people because these strangers will come into our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Plainville suffered from that initially, but then they realized how successfully economically it was for the towns that had the trail.
Yeah.
So then the government bought into it, the citizens bought into it, but there is a train track, but there's actually still a train.
That would be a problem for bicycles. Yeah.
That would be a problem. And so we're having to work around that. They did try to negotiate, see if they could get something. And Malloy actually worked very hard to try to see if he could work a deal. It didn't come through. So they've reworked it, but there is now a design, and they hopefully, fingers crossed, in the next couple of years, it will be done.
That's interesting. You talked about some of the NIMBY mindset, the not my backyard. Because this is literally, some places, in people's backyards, behind their property. And you've talked about the towns liking the economic benefits. Do you know, I mean, I don't know if this has been studied at all, does it actually affect property values for the houses in the area?
There is information on that. I don't have that at my fingertips. Do you, Barbara?
I don't have it on my fingertips, but I know it increases.
Good recreation would increase the property value.
Increase the value of it.
Yeah.
Well, for example, there's that new big condo development in Hamden that's on the trail, and they go by the name of Canal Crossing. So increasingly, these developments that are adjacent to the trail are co-branding.
Yeah,
the
they're not
trail.
just okay with it; they're actively
They
using it as a way to
actually
lure
are
in.
leveraging it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And that's happening in New Haven as well,
Yeah.
and all along the trail, really.
Yeah, and all around the country, really. I feel
Mhm.
like there's a lot of
Right.
efforts. You know, you hear about the towns where people are moving, the cool towns, as it were, and you hear about Portland and Asheville and all these towns. The recreation, the bicycling, that sort of thing is a central component of a lot of their plans for the future.
Yes, we had the Portland.
Yeah.
I apologize for not remembering his title, but he was very active in their whole bike system there,
Yeah.
and they are just amazing. And the reduction in cars and the
Mhm.
increase in the people using bikes in Portland, Oregon, is just outstanding. But
Yeah.
and then we've had the people in Boston who talk about how to put the bikes on the streets with the car safely. And
Mhm.
we do that at our annual meeting. We try to have a speaker who will talk onto that issue, looking to the future
Yeah.
and trying to make the trail so it could be utilitarian, so that people can use it to come to work.
You talk about looking to the future. So you finished that last section through Plainville.
Correct.
You're not all done.
Oh, no. Because, see, what we're doing now is a lot of maintenance work because, unfortunately, the trail does not take care of itself. And so even though a town gets a lot of economic benefit,
Yeah.
it does cost them because when the roots get too bad for the trees, particularly in some of the older sections, and I don't know about down south.
This has definitely been happening in Hamden. And
The
it's
tree
a,
roots are
it's a
growing in
whole
and
new
splitting
kind of
the
technology, right? They're
Right.
having to bring in sort of highway construction and maintenance technology onto the trail to maintain it. Because as you can imagine, if you're on rollerblades or a bike and you're hitting one of these root bumps, that can be really dangerous, unlike in a car, right? Where it's a little more forgiving.
And when they first started building the trail, they weren't really thinking about roots. And so they might cut out a little, and then, 5
They
years.
plant a little tree next to the trail that looks nice, but it's 20 years later now.
And the roots are, bumping things up. So, and that's expensive to have to, because you got to cut up the trail, you got to cut the roots. There's a whole maintenance. And then there's the winter. Trash is also, depending on whether the town is going to put in a trash container or not put in a trash container, porta potties.
And that all falls to the towns along the trail.
It falls to the town to the extent that we can help, we do. And there's the fencing. I mean, there's just a lot of little things that you don't think about, but it enhances the trail because it's the regular maintenance. So that's what we're doing now, because we are effectively, we are working with Plainville, but from Farmington up, we're done.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the same for the southern end now, especially because Cheshire just opened. That was a long time in coming. They were the first town with Hamden to construct the trail and among the last to actually finish building it. But it's quite thrilling to see that. And of course, it becomes more and more popular. There's more and more demand once it's
more
complete
traffic,
the way it is. Yeah. And almost soon, we'll be down to the Long Wharf area.
So 20 years in, but at least another 20 years going and beyond that into the future to grow and readapt to changing technologies like e-bikes and all this kind of stuff.
Correct.
So the work won't be done anytime soon.
No.
So there's a project in the works to get the trail, as we mentioned, from Center New Haven to the coast. What other projects are out there?
Oh my God.
The airline trail. Is that
Oh, you mean other trails?
Yeah.
To connect to other trails?
Yeah. What's going on in the trail scene?
Well, there's the airline trail. Then Windsor is doing a trail, which is farming the trail, and I believe they're planning to go up to the airport, but they're also going into Hartford.
Okay.
And that's a lovely trail.
Yeah.
I don't know their name, but it just follows the Connecticut River.
Okay.
So it's just a really lovely trail to ride.
And in New Haven, there's also so our trail is meant to go down to the water, and that's really where it historically began.
At Long Wharf?
Yes, at Long Wharf.
Okay.
Of course, Long Wharf was not where Long Wharf is now. It was considerably inland. It was basically
all of Long Wharf, where CCM's offices, among other things, are, is actually man-made. Yeah.
Exactly. But so there's a lot of trails along the coast, right? There's the Harbor Trail around New Haven. These are all part of New Haven's master plan, and there's a lot of desire in getting those established more formally. There's a lot of industry, of course, that's problematic to get around. And then there's the Shoreline Trail, the old trolley line, essentially, that went both east and west from New Haven, definitely out to Milford, to the west, and certainly along the coast on the
And there's
east.
efforts to make the trolley trail into
Absolutely. There's a big effort, and that's an ongoing, there's a dedicated crew of citizens that are trying to make that happen, are getting funding for visioning exercises and designing that. But again, as I said at the beginning, the problem there is that there's a need to actually buy property to make that happen, and that is a whole other can of worms.
That's a much bigger
easier
endeavor.
for us because we just had that right of way. It was
right. There's also a trail that goes from Hartford over the river and into Manchester. That's paved, but then it's going to connect to the airline trail, which is the Stone Dust. Middletown, I know, is working on their trail, and I think they're going to try to figure out, and I don't have it visualized, but they want to try to connect down to the southern part of the trail.
Okay.
So they've got sections. So we have a lot of towns that have little sections, and the town fathers are sitting back and going, okay, now how do we connect it to either them or us?
So that might be part of the future of sort of the trails in Connecticut too, is connecting all these separate efforts in one. Like your organizations have come together. Do you see 20 years from now you coming together with one of these other ones to make the Connecticut
absolutely.
Trail Association, or
that would be really nice to have one group of advocates. I think there'd be a lot of power in that.
Yeah.
But with the 169 towns in Connecticut, each having their own way of doing things, as in terms of regionalization, that's very challenging.
Yeah.
But it's looking, we're optimistic, exactly. And because there's so much demand that's already been demonstrated, I think that we'll be able to make those connections and create those synergies.
And you can see it, and you can see how the trails are starting to, people are, when they're designing their trail, they're looking outside.
They're thinking about it in a much broader
in a
way,
regional kind of way. Correct.
So looking a little bit farther back, talking about regionals and regions, what do you know about across the border Massachusetts? Are people going to be able to ride all the way into Northampton, central Massachusetts at some point?
They and I think they've got it all designed. It's just a matter of when they get to Westfield. Right now you can ride all the way to Westfield, Massachusetts. But there were 6 bridges in Westfield, which
are no longer there or not.
Well, no, they had to put them in, right?
Okay.
And so that was a big stumbling block. But I think they are now all in. So then it's just a small section to connect to the Mahan Trail. And then the Mahan Trail goes right into Northampton. And then there's a trail that actually goes beyond Massachusetts.
So there's organizations like
the
yours in Massachusetts.
Yes, absolutely. And I think
who's
that
up there if people want to look into it?
Do you know the names of the organizations up there? There's so many. It's a little bit town by town, the way it was before in Connecticut, right?
Okay.
When this first started. And of course, they're just at a previous phase with it because they're still town
So
by town.
we're a little farther along in the process.
Exactly.
Yes.
But they've been catching up very, very quickly.
Yeah.
They have all state funding. So it wasn't so town centric once they decided they're going to do a trail. So that the trail from the Mass border towards Westfield was really just the state decided they were going to do it, and they did it. Now they did it because they had train tracks, but they didn't have to go through each little town
and get the
for
permission.
their funding and stuff.
That's interesting.
So it made it a little bit
a different way of doing it.
It was a different way to do it. Correct.
Well, that's great. So this one goes out to both of you. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, why do we need a Farmington Canal Heritage Trail? You want to start?
Well, I think that historically that's where this country began, right? There were no roads. There were just trails through the woods.
Yep.
And so it's certainly part of our heritage. And there's a reason why the word heritage is in the official name of our trail, because it doesn't only connect, the cities and towns in our state, but it connects back to our heritage. Originally way back when as a colony of England, and then through the industrial era, there's many parts of the trail that connect to that industrial past and actually the industrial present of Connecticut as well.
Yeah, you cut behind some businesses that are actively running.
Exactly. And it also connects cultures, frankly. You've got Connecticut, I would say Connecticut's cultural capital of New Haven is so explicitly connected for pedestrians and bikers now to, the exurban woodlands and the suburbs. Where a lot of people live.
Yeah, you can hop on in the middle of Science Park, New Haven, and
literally and
the woods.
figuratively. Yeah. It's just such a great metaphor for the connections and the synergies that this state has in place, and that we want to offer in this way that's non-carbon intensive. That's hopefully helping to contribute to the mitigating climate change. Yeah. And hopefully encouraging people to get out of their cars and commute.
Get active
other means.
Yeah.
And it's just lovely to walk. I mean, if you walk in the northern section, because the southern section is much more urban.
Yeah.
Once you get past really Simsbury, it really is all country, and it's just
woods.
peaceful and beautiful. And we have over 200,000 people use the trail, the Northern Trail, every single year.
Yeah.
And so
200,000, you said?
200,000 we have counters also. We all share the data with the state, but we're consistently over 200,000 using the trail. And it just is a peaceful way for them to enjoy life and get out and get some exercise.
Yeah.
I mean, you go on the trail up the northern section, and I've ridden the southern section, but so I know it's the same. There's constantly people there. They're rollerblading. They're walking their dogs. They're just walking. They're out with their friends. They're just, it's a wonderful addition to life.
Yeah.
So it's good for people's souls. It's good for their bodies. It's good for the environment, and it's good for the town.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like a good deal. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
The Municipal
Thank you
Voice.
for having us.
You're welcome. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like. And watch out for our CCM Chat series on our YouTube page. Just search for CCM Chats, and you'll find the next one in a convenient playlist.